Hello, my name is Lucy. I was born in Hong Kong, Kowloon. I was 11 months old when I was adopted, and I was flown over to the UK and grew up just outside of Windsor, where the Queen has one of her castles. My profession is I'm a writer, actor, and transracial adoptee activist. When I was a little girl, I was extremely little. Smaller than most other kids. I was quite shy. I could be quite feisty if pushed, and I was pushed a lot. But I think most people thought that I was kind of a slightly cute but weird kid that stood off to the side. When I was a child, I didn't have a single one favourite possession. The thing that I suppose I favoured the most as quite a young child were books, and especially, even though I was fairly young, Dickens, and for some reason Charlotte Bronte, which is a bit of an odd one. But yes, those were the things that I suppose I favourited the most when I was a child. As a child, did I have any imaginary friends? No, I actually don't think I did. I made the toys that I played with come alive, I suppose. So in that sense, I suppose I did have imaginary friends, but they were kind of like embodied in something that was already there. When I was fairly young, as a child, I wanted to grow up to be white, and that lasted for a good few years. So from infant school, kindergarten age, through until I suppose I went to what would be called junior school over here. So that's when you're about 5 or 6. I only knew that I didn't want to be a nurse, and I didn't want to be a air hostess, which were kind of like two of the big things when I was growing up that were kind of like seen as wow jobs for females. And I didn't want to be either of those things. So for a long time, I don't think I really did know what I wanted to do when I grew up. When I was a child, I felt most comfortable either sitting on a windowsill reading or up a tree. Not necessarily reading, but watching the world go by. And I used to like doing that, until one day I think I climbed one tree too many that was too tall. And given the fact that I was actually incredibly small for my age, and they had to call the fire brigade out to get me down from the tree, because it's always much easier to climb up a tree than it is to climb down. But yes, those were kind of the two places that I felt at most at ease with, especially when I was kind of like a smaller child. As a young child, I think school, I remember it being fairly fun, because you kind of like you don't start on the education, well, on the really formal educational route. As I got older and went up levels, I found school quite stressful. I learnt that I could run much faster than most people, so that got me out of trouble, usually. By the time I got to secondary school, so that's 11 years and above, I didn't like school that much, and I don't think the people within the school liked me that much either. It was quite a battleground, and I went to an all-girls school, so girls can be particularly spiky if they want to be, and they can be particularly mean. And I stood out like a sore thumb, so I was unfortunate to get the back end or the sharp end of a lot of people who didn't like me for whatever reason, mainly because I looked different. So as I grew older, it did become quite a challenge, but I made it through the other end eventually. As a child, as a young child, I would say, and then when I hit about 6, I kind of got told off by my adoptive parents for asking too many questions. And one of the questions that I started to ask at that age is, I was curious because I didn't look like my parents or indeed anybody else that surrounded me. I wanted to know where I was from. And this was during the 60s, so it's kind of like the Cold War was still very much in evidence, and communist China was not trusted at all. And I was told that if I continued to kind of like inquire about where I'd come from, somebody from the Chinese embassy would find out, kidnap me and take me back to China, and I would grow up on a commune and be absolutely miserable. And from that sort of point onwards, I think I had a recurring nightmare which lasted well on into my sort of early teens, that I would actually be kidnapped, and I was petrified of going to sleep in the dark, which is, you know, sort of, I mean, some children do have a sort of a fear of the dark, but it sort of got to the point where I was convinced that there were these sort of people in the shadows sort of coming to get me, and that persisted for quite a long time. So yes, I mean, I don't think I'd ever seen another Chinese person apart from on television, which is a completely different thing, during that period. So I was, I guess, in some senses, petrified of my fellow countrymen, which is a bit sad when you think about it. I actually don't think I had any specific role models. I was thinking about this the other day, and there was, apart from, I suppose, Bert Kwok, who most people are familiar with as Kato in the Pink Panther films. I guess he was the only, as a child, he was the only person that I really liked. I suppose Bert was the first real East Asian actor that I saw on television. No, I mean, I think I got most of my, I don't know if you can call them role models, were more from reading novels. Who or what comforted me when I felt afraid? My thumb, when I was very, very small. I was a really bad thumb sucker, so much so that I indented my thumb for a while. And funnily enough, again, books. I do the stereotypical thing of lights out and then it would be torch underneath the sheets reading books, and those were the two things that comforted me the most. If I could give advice to my younger me, then it would be not to be afraid. Definitely not to be afraid of asking questions, and to follow one's heart. Those are the most important pieces of advice that I would love someone to have told me when I was younger. I started making a documentary back in 2010, which I have now almost finished. Yay! Which apparently is very, very quick for a documentary. It doesn't feel like it. It's called Abandoned Adopted Here, which is basically looking at the experience of growing up in the UK during the 60s as a transracial adoptee. And not just me, but talking to several other transracial adoptees based in the UK. And indeed, a cross-section of people who identify themselves as British East Asian, because I'm quite curious to try and understand from other people if they feel in the same way as me about being British East Asian. Because here in the UK, the idea that you can hyphenate your existence, your identity, is something which is quite strange. So that is now being has been submitted to several film festivals. So I'm now waiting to hear if we've made the grade. And I suppose the other project which would be of most interest to the wider community is a full-length stage play that I've written called Conversations with My Unknown Mother. That play is about the conversations that I think we all maybe wish or dread having and never have. So it's around the adoption triad. So that's the birth mother, the adopted mother, and the adoptee. And it's what those three principal characters would say to each other if they met. And it's a conversation, a three-way conversation. Well, it ends up being slightly more than a three-way conversation, but looking at the, sort of, I think the questions that many adoptees and indeed many birth mothers have, and the fear that you have, and the regrets that one might have, and when you're given the opportunity to actually voice those questions, do the answers that come back, do they meet your expectations on either side? So, I mean, I think it will be an interesting project. I'm doing a lot of writing. Another poem that I've done has been accepted into an American anthology of poetry called Poeming Pigeons. That's really difficult to say. Which is a collection of poetry about birds. And my contribution is China is not a good place to be a bird. So I think that's coming out in May or maybe the end of April. So keep a lookout for that. I'm sure it'll be available from Amazon, the wonderful Amazon. I'm writing another one-person show, which again will have something to do with transracial adoption and mental health. And another theatre commission for a well-known London theatre, which I can't divulge. It's not in the public domain yet. So writing seems to be kind of like taking over more and more. We'll see what the rest of the year has to bring. And that's about it for the moment, which I think is enough. This is Lucy signing out, and thank you very much for taking the time to watch me, and it's been an honor to be invited to talk to you. Remember that you are never alone. And if you want to drop me a line, then please do. You can visit my website, and I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions that you might have, or just be an ear for you to kind of like pour your thoughts out to. But as I said, never forget you're not alone. And also remember that you're unique and you're amazing. And thank you very much for your time. Bye.